some stories from at some point. And when my boyfriend's son was young, I used to read to him from this book, and now I read to my niece from it, so it's quite a special book to me, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Okay. Stories for bedtime. Oh, let's see, who's it? So it's compiled by Fiona Waters and illustrated by Penny Dan. When was this published? 1991. So yeah, almost 30 years old now. We'll just start at the beginning. So this one is called The Flying Rabbit by Kenneth McLeish. One day, Small Rabbit was out in the meadow as usual. He looked up at the birds in the sky and he thought to himself, "I'm tired of walking about on the ground all the time. I'm going to fly like the birds." He climbed a tree. It wasn't easy because his front legs were too short and his back legs were too long. When he was halfway up, he looked down. The ground was a long way off. "All right," he thought, "now's the time to fly." He spread his front legs out like wings and gave a great big rapid jump off his branch. But he was lucky, for just underneath his flying branch was the nest of the crow family. He landed in it with a bump. "Ow," said the two little crows. "Watch where you're falling." Small Rabbit didn't answer. He was wondering why he hadn't been able to fly. "Can you fly?" he asked the little crows. "Not yet," they answered, "but we will one day if we try hard enough." "So will I," said Small Rabbit. "I'll stay here with you until then." Small Rabbit stayed in the crow's nest all day. It was a bit of a squeeze, especially when Mr. and Mrs. Crow came back. They weren't pleased to find a new rabbit baby in their nest. As it began to get dark, Mrs. Rabbit noticed that Small was missing. She went out to the edge of the field to look for him. "Small," she called. "Small, where are you?" "Up here," said Small, poking his head over the side of the crow's nest. "Good gracious! Whatever are you doing up there?" asked Mrs. Rabbit. "Learning to fly." "Come down, you silly child. Rabbits don't fly." "I won't come down." His mother went back to the burrow and fetched Mr. Rabbit. He came and sat beside her under the tree. "Be careful, Small," he said. "It's a long way down." All the 9 little rabbits came too. They all sat in a row under the tree, looking up at Small. No one knew what to do. Mr. and Mrs. Crow began to get cross. "Look," they said to Small, "you can't stay here all night. There isn't room." "It won't take all night," answered Small. "As soon as I can fly, I'll go." "But rabbits can't fly," shouted the crows. "In that case, I'll make history," said Small. The crows got angrier and angrier. The 2 baby crows had to sit hanging over the edge of the nest. They looked like umbrellas that hadn't been folded up properly. At last Mr. Crow lost his temper. "You stay here," he said to Mrs. Crow. "I'm going out," and off he flew. So there they all sat, 11 rabbits in the field under the tree, and 1 rabbit and 3 crows in the nest. The biggest crow was hanging over the edge. The shadows of night began to creep across the field. Mr. Crow was away a long time. At last, as the sun was beginning to disappear behind the hills, he came flying back. He landed on the side of the nest and nearly fell off again. There was so little room. "It's all right," he said. "I've been to see Owl, and he's told me what to do." "What did he say?" asked Mrs. Crow. "Come up here and I'll tell you," said Mr. Crow. Mr. and Mrs. Crow flew to a branch higher up in the tree, and he whispered into her ear behind his wing. No one else said anything. The 11 rabbits in the field, and the 1 rabbit and 2 crows in the nest sat still and waited. At last, Mr. and Mrs. Crow came back. "Come on, little crows," said Mr. Crow. "Time to be going." "Going? Going where?" said the little crows. "To the rabbit warren, of course. If rabbits are going to start flying, crows will have to start living in holes in the ground. Down we go." He picked up one of the little crows in his beak and flew off. Mrs. Crow elbowed Small out of the way with her wing and flew off with the other little crow. They circled round and down towards the rabbit burrow on the other side of the field. Small watched them go. All at once he began to feel lonely. The sun had almost gone. He was getting cold, all on his own in the nest. He looked down. The 11 rabbits from his family were still sitting on the ground watching him. I think I'd better come down," he said. "All right," said Mr. Rabbit. "Are you going to fly?" "Not today. I don't feel much like flying anymore. Rabbits ought to stay on the ground and leave flying to the birds." "How will you get down then?" "I'll have to jump," said Small nervously. "Will you catch me?" "You can't jump," his mother said. "You'll hurt yourself." "I know," said Mr. Rabbit suddenly. He whispered to the other rabbits. Then he and Mrs. Rabbit lay down and Large climbed onto their backs. When he was ready, the medium twins climbed up and balanced on top of his head. Then the bravest of the triplets climbed up and stood on their heads. Soon there was a ladder of rabbits reaching all the way up to the crow's nest. The baby rabbits were too small to climb, but they stood by ready to catch anyone who fell. "Come on, Small," said Mr. Rabbit in a squashed sort of voice. "Be quick before we all fall over." As soon as Small was down, the rabbit ladder unsorted itself. "Thank goodness for that," said Mr. Rabbit. "It was flat work being in the bottom." "Don't ever do a thing like that again," said Mrs. Rabbit crossly to Small. "Look what's happened now. We've got a family of crows moved into our burrow. How are we going to get rid of them?" But there was no need. As soon as the crow family saw that their nest was empty, they flew back and put the baby crows safely inside it. "We'll move into a new one tomorrow, as high as we can go," said Mr. Crow. "That's why, if you go and look, you'll find that all crows live in nests right at the top of very high trees, and rabbits stay on the ground." Oh, I like this one. So this is called Cheese, Peas and Chocolate Pudding, and it's by Betty Van Whitson. I'm just going to readjust the microphone and then we'll read this one. Okay. sounded so good the little boy reached his hand out for a bite. "Sure," said his brother. "Here." The little boy almost put the carrot in his mouth, but at the last minute remembered, and he said, "Is this peas?" "No, it's a carrot," said his brother. "Peas," said the little boy firmly, handing the carrot back. Once his daddy was eating a big dish of raspberry jelly. It looked so shiny and red, shiny red and cool. The little boy came over and held his mouth open. "Want a taste?" asked his daddy. The little boy looked and looked at the jelly. He almost looked it off the dish. "But, is it chocolate pudding?" he asked. "No, son, it's jelly," said his daddy. So the little boy frowned and backed away. "Chocolate pudding," he said. His grandma baked cookies for him. His grandpa bought him an ice cream cone. The little boy just shook his head. His aunt and uncle invited him for a fried chicken dinner. Everybody ate fried chicken and more fried chicken, except the little boy. And you know what he ate? Cheese, peas and chocolate pudding. Cheese, peas and chocolate pudding. Every day the same old things. Cheese, peas and chocolate pudding. But one day was a very funny thing happened. The little boy was playing puppy. He lay on the floor and growled and barked and rolled over. He crept to the table where his big brother was having lunch. "Arf, arf," he barked. "Good doggy," said his brother, patting his head. The little boy lay down on his back on the floor and barked again. But at that minute his big brother dropped a piece of something from his plate, and the little boy's mouth was ready to say "Arf." And what do you think happened? Something dropped into the little boy's mouth. He sat up in surprise, because something was on his tongue, and something was warm and juicy and delicious. And it didn't taste like cheese, and it didn't taste like peas, and it certainly wasn't chocolate pudding. The little boy chewed slowly. Each chew tasted better than the last. He swallowed something and opened his mouth again, as wide as he could. "Want some more?" asked his brother. The little boy closed his mouth and thought. "That's not cheese," he said. "No, it's not," said his brother. "And it isn't peas." "No, not peas," said his brother. "And it couldn't be chocolate pudding." "No, it certainly is not chocolate pudding," smiled his brother. "It's hamburger." The little boy thought hard. "I like hamburger," he said. So his big brother shared the rest of his hamburger with him, and ever after that, guess what? Ever after that, the little boy ate cheese, peas and chocolate pudding and hamburger. Until he was your age, of course. When he was your age, he ate everything. Okay, we'll do one more. And this is The Beast with 1,000 Teeth by Terry Jones. Oops, sorry. A long time ago in a land far away, the most terrible beast that ever lived roamed the countryside. It had 4 eyes, 6 legs, and 1,000 teeth. In the morning, it would gobble up men as they went to work in the fields. In the afternoon, it would break into lonely farms and eat up mothers and children as they sat down to lunch. And at night, it would stalk the streets of the towns looking for its supper. In the biggest of all the towns, there lived a pastry cook and his wife, and they had a small son whose name was Sam. One morning, as Sam was helping his father to make pastries, he heard that the mayor had offered said Sam. "You're too small," said his father. "Now run along and take those cakes to the palace before it gets dark." So Sam set off for the palace with the tray of cakes balanced on his head. But he was so busy thinking of the 100 bags of gold that he lost his way, and it began to grow dark. "Oh dear," said Sam. "The beast will be coming soon to look for his supper. I'd better hurry home." So he turned and started to hurry home as fast as he could, but he was utterly and completely lost, and he didn't know which way to turn. Soon it grew very dark. The streets were deserted, and everyone was safe inside and had bolted their doors for fear of the beast. Poor Sam ran up this street and down the next, but he couldn't find the way home. Then suddenly in the distance he heard a sound like thunder, and he knew that the beast with 1,000 teeth was approaching the city. Sam ran up to the nearest house and started to bang on the door. "Let me in," he cried. "I'm out in the streets, and the beast is approaching the city. Listen." And he could hear the sound of the beast getting nearer and nearer. The ground shook, and the windows rattled in their frames, but the people inside said no. If they opened the door, the beast might get in and eat them too. So poor Sam ran up to the next house and banged as hard as he could on their door, but the people told him to go away. Then he heard a roar, and he heard the beast coming down the street, and he ran as hard as he could, but no matter how hard he ran, he could hear the beast getting nearer and nearer. And he glanced over his shoulder, and there it was at the end of the street. Poor Sam in his fright dropped his tray and hid under some steps, and the beast got nearer and nearer until it was right on top of him, and it bent down, and its terrible jaws went snack, and it gobbled up the tray of cakes, and then it turned to Sam. Sam plucked up all his courage, and he shouted as loud as he could, "Don't eat me, beast! Wouldn't you rather have some more cakes?" The beast stopped and looked at Sam, and then he looked back at the empty tray and said, "Well, they were very nice cakes." And he reached under the steps where poor Sam was hiding and pulled him out in its great horny claws. "Oh, please," cried Sam, "if you don't eat me, I'll make you some more. I'll make you lots of good things, for I'm the son of the best pastry cook in the land." "Will you make more of those pink ones?" asked the beast. "Oh yes, I'll make you as many pink ones as you can eat," cried Sam. "Very well," said the beast, and put poor Sam in his pocket and carried him home to his lair. The beast lived in a dark and dismal cave. The floor was littered with the bones of the people it had eaten, and the stone walls were marked with lines where the beast used to sharpen its teeth. But Sam got to work right away and started to bake as many cakes as he could for the beast. And when he ran out of flour or eggs or anything else, the beast would run back into town to get them, although it never paid for anything. Sam cooked and baked, and he made scones and eclairs and meringues and sponge cakes and shortbreads and donuts. But the beast looked at them and said, "You haven't made any pink ones." "Just a minute," said Sam, and he took all the cakes and he covered every one of them in pink icing. "There you are," said Sam. "They're all pink." "Great," said the beast, and ate a lot. Well, the beast grew so fond of Sam's cakes that it shortly gave up eating people altogether, and it stayed at home in the cave, eating and eating, and growing fatter and fatter. This went on for a whole year, until one morning Sam woke up to find the beast rolling around, groaning and beating the floor. Of course you can guess what was the matter with it. Sam. I'm afraid it's all that pink icing that has given you toothache. Well, the toothache got worse and worse, and because the beast had 1,000 teeth, it was soon suffering from the worst toothache that anyone in the whole history of the world has ever suffered from. It lay on its side and held its head and roared in agony, until Sam began to feel quite sorry for it. The beast howled and howled with pain, until it could stand it no longer. "Please, Sam, help me," it cried. "Very well," said Sam. "Sit still and open your mouth." So the beast sat very still and opened its mouth, while Sam got a pair of pliers and took out every single tooth in the beast's head.